Tonight's speaker, no stranger to the Bird Club, Jon Kauffman, presenting on all his work that he's doing with American Kestrel boxes and barn owl boxes and all the various Nest camera footage that he's collected. So instead of just me talking about it, let's have him show us and tell us about it. So John, turn it over to you.
Thanks, Brady. All right, I'm guessing everybody can see that all right?
Yep.
So I'm going to take the time this evening and just kind of dive deep into what the life in a nest box. So I have a few select. Most of my presentation is not to talk about the nest box program itself that I oversee at Shavers Creek, about the success and things like that, but more of some of the life history or the phenology of what happens in a nest box. So I won't dive too deep into numbers of success rates and things like that. So a lot of this that you'll see tonight is mainly some clips, a lot of video clips and things like that of things that's happened in a nest box. So I oversee American Kestrel nest boxes on private land ownerships, land, and as well as barn owls. And so that's where I'm able to get a majority of this footage of looking in the boxes when I'm doing nest checks, and as well as some live nest cams that I get in there as long as there's internet around. So we'll kind of kick it off with North America's smallest falcon, American Kestrel. This is, as we all know, a secondary cavity nester that prefers nest boxes. And so we have opportunities for them to find cavities. That's a specific need that they have, just like we have specific needs. Cavities are their needs, so they don't necessarily build their homes or by carrying nesting material in, but they look from excavated cavities from woodpeckers and so forth. Some of these cavities are in our landscape, if in the infrastructure. And if you think many years ago, our upkeep of wooden siding and roofing and fascia and overhangs were not really well done. And you can see here, there's a slight little hole in the corner of the house where at one time I saw a kestrel fly in. So I decided to snap a picture of this house and to kind of illustrate where they were nesting before we put our boxes. So we have a variety of boxes that we can put on the side of structures and buildings for kestrels to nest in. But then we also have these pole mounted boxes that are about 14 feet up and telescoping type poles. So they can actually be lowered to easily check and clean and maintain, which is very important thing that for success of kestrels is the maintenance of it. So this is out near a fence. It's out away from trees. We have very good success with this style of keeping starlings out, and as well as squirrels and any type of other type predators such as rat snakes and things like that. So that has been very successful. We have very little nest boxes on structures. So as with secondary cavity nesters, there's a if you go on Zillow, the secondary cavity nesters are really having a hard time finding a place to live per se. There's a lot of animals in our fauna that are using these cavities, so it's hard to find this availability for them to find this place that they have needs for to rear their young and raise their young. So here we have a pair of screech owls in a screech owl box that are nesting. And then, of course, we have our friendly small mammalian friend, the gray squirrel, coming in as well. But as you see, the screech owls do maintain a stronghold in the box. And I think because there's a strong pair bond happening right here, and that they see this as a potential nesting opportunity, the screech owls will put up a fight. And I've seen it opposite, where the screech owl is one screech owl in a box and the squirrel comes in and kicks the screech owl out. So if there's a strong bond between the pair, possible nesting opportunity, they will put up a fight, and we'll see that with kestrels as well. So again, the housing market is pretty tough out there. You have lots of things, and I have a little thing up at the top there of graph of something when the housing market starts, when we start looking for cavities. Other birds are out there in February, kind of searching and looking for cavities, and you can see this bluebird popping its head in and coming in and exploring a possible nesting opportunity as well. Either that or they're taking the nesting material out and building their own nest somewhere else. So the housing market is in February starts. And then even over the winter, we have species kind of using the box as an overwintering spot. Here we have an eastern screech owl sleeping during the day. And this is, I think, was taken in early March. And I'm assuming that this screech owl was in that box completely throughout the winter, staying warm and hunting. And you can maybe was able to catch a rabbit in there as well. So it did stick around, I think, throughout March, and then eventually moved, and then screech owls came in and took over for the season. So I couldn't get in there and clean it because the screech owl was hanging out in there. So again, starlings are also competitive within themselves. They're also within the species looking for a possible nesting opportunity. So they will fight with each other over this prime real estate. And again, this is happening in late February, early March, where these birds will come in and they're fighting for a spot to rear their young. And like I said, with the screech owls, if the pair kestrel is really adamant about this is the box that I want to rear my young, they will put up a fight and kick those starlings out. But if there's not a pair of kestrels around, starlings generally take over, and it's hard to kick them out. So you want to get that box ready and prepared as soon as possible. Now, okay. So now in nest building, they don't technically build their nest, but they will prepare their nest. So if you look here, just give me a sorry about that. I was showing my daughter something. So nest building. So kestrels don't necessarily make their nest, but they prepare their nest, and they are often going in the nest box to scout it out. The way they prepare the box is they create a cup in the nesting material for the egg laying. So if you take a look and say to yourself, what's the difference between the two boxes, one on the left and one on the right? You'll notice that there's a significant amount of wood chips in the one with the male kestrel, which is on the right. And the one on the left is the female, and you'll start seeing her fluffer her wings around. So she's looking to make a cup. If that cup is not properly made, those eggs can roll around improperly and could be damaged throughout the nesting season. So it's important to maintain and check in February, March to put enough, replenish the wood chips in there so they have enough material to create a nice cup for them to lay their eggs and to be secure. And we'll see it later a little bit that the nesting material is also nice thermal insulation for some of these freeze warnings that we get here in late April. And so the female came in, and now she's kind of fluffing her wings a little bit and starting to create that cup for the egg laying. So that takes time, and I've often seen these pairs kind of hanging out around the box and checking out the box, but not necessarily laying the eggs. So they do a lot of scouting. They do a lot of making sure that this is where they want to go, maybe even regulating and looking at the temperatures that are seeing in the spring and saying, is this a nice weather that we should lay in? So this then comes the egg laying and incubation of the young. And as we're kind of shifting through mid-March now, we start seeing some kestrels laying their eggs. And into April is when it gets really heavy. But if you look at the times on the left, I recorded the times of the egg laying or the incubation of the females to the males. So what do you notice there? Talk to yourself about what's going on there as you might pick up something there. You could probably see that the female is incubating much longer periods of time throughout the day. So the female's main role is incubation. At 6:17, so there I got a snapshot of an egg. That's how I checked the nest box. At 6:17, the female leaves. So the female was always on the eggs overnight. She was in the box every night. The male was never in keeping the eggs warm at night. So at 7:03, the male comes and gives her a morning break. Not very long though, maybe 5. And as you can see, maybe 23 minutes was the max. But the majority of the time, the female is incubating the eggs in the box, where the male is kind of bringing her food, possibly some pieces there, and maintaining a view of the territory, which is very important to have perching opportunities for the male to view the territory, to see if there's any predators such as Cooper's hawks and things like that coming around. So keep it, that's in April. And here you can see more incubation times. You can see the blue is the female and the red is the male, and it kind of goes up and down. But in general, female will incubate much longer. The gap in the chart there is because the camera is out and I couldn't even calculate the number of opportunities for incubation and things like that. So here's another check, and I think this box is in Belleville in Mifflin County. And as you see, sometimes when we check the box, we often come across the female sitting tightly on the eggs, not moving. Probably saw the first ever iPhone 7 in her life. So the egg laying and incubation continues to be throughout April and May, but here I have a chart of showing how many switches there are. So what time of day are they doing the switches the most? I was interested in, especially if you're observing a nest box and you want to kind of catch what's happening, especially with the breeding bird atlas, if you want to see if there is actually kind of behavior in the box, or if you see a box and you don't see kestrels. But as you can see, the most switches you'll see is early morning, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then later at 7, right before she goes into roost. So that was throughout a 2020 nesting season. Later at 7 o'clock, there seemed to be a lot more switches than any other hour. So in the evening is when they start getting off the eggs more. And I also wanted to see, when is the best time to check a kestrel box to see how many eggs there are. So if you go out more in 1 o'clock hour or late afternoon, you more likely see the female in the midst of a switch with the male, and you might be able to see visually a clutch of eggs there, which is great for me to keep some more accurate data of first egg laying date or when they're hatching as well. So this is a male sitting on the nest, and I think we come in and the female will come in and do a switch here. Very vocal when they come in. She comes in very vocal, communication, and he eagerly hops off, no problem there. A little bit of head bushing and pushing and things like that, but eagerly coming off the nest. So this was interesting. This was May 9th. And you can see the temperature range here for May 9th as it dropped down way down in the 20s and pretty early. And the video on the left is a female at night roosting in the box. So she's keeping the eggs warm. Her head's tucked in well. Her breathing's very heavy. She's definitely, working the metabolism up to keep those eggs warm and herself warm as well. Her feathers are fluffed out. And this was a night that I was a little worried about waking up and seeing what was happening. And then in the morning, the male came in, gave her a break, and then she came back. And I think he was basically saying, it's cold out there. I don't want to go back out. And he did not want to get off these eggs. And she was adamant about getting on the eggs and saying, this is my job, not yours. And she was a little bit pushy here in the beginning, but as you see, the male eventually leaves the box. And not very often do you see both male and female in the box spending time together. I don't know what kind of communication's happening here, but she definitely said, now go out and find me food, maybe. So. He wanted to preen a little bit and hang out, but I think she was really pushy about getting moving. So feeding the young, as we move into late April here, like today, this week, they are hatching. A lot of boxes are starting to hatch. Next week, we see a big push in hatching. And then throughout May, there's a lot of young in nest boxes. So you could probably assume that if you're out there on your breeding block and you see a pair of kestrels near some kind of nest box, and they're most likely have nestlings in there at this time, well, at least in May. So that's a good assumption there. And so when that happens, the roles change a little bit. The male does not come in the box hardly at all, does not take care of the young. There might be occasional food feeding, but I think the food exchange happens outside the box. The male or female captures the food, tears it up in pieces, and brings it in for small nibbles to cut up to the young that are just being born or hatched. So the female takes the role of coming in the box, maybe getting it from the male and so forth, and then spends the majority of time in the box while the male is out constantly hunting. That's what I'm assuming, since I don't have a lot of video footage of outside activity. But basically, the female spends the time in the box. So again, you see a box, you see a male around, don't see the female. You can watch for some switches happening or the food exchanges happening. That's a good indication that there's some nestlings inside a kestrel box. So the feeding continues throughout April and May as they continue to grow. It's very interesting to see what kind of food they brought in. Most likely small nibbits of food, which I couldn't tell, but in this video, you can definitely tell what is brought into that box. So you can see there a chipmunk was brought in, and this box is located out near Ag Progress Days, so there's plenty of food out there. So she brought in a whole item that time, and that was probably one of the few times that she brought in that whole item. So this is usually a time where it's a good check boxes. So both male and female are usually out hunting, and you can't see the adults very often. So there's also some nest box and feather maintenance. The nestlings, as you can see, this box, the substrate is very clean. This is 30 days of being in the box. So once they hatch, they spend 30 days in the box. So there's a lot of fecal matter going on there. So they try to block the camera view as much as possible there. So this is a great clip to illustrate. Look at all the fecal matter around the box and how they keep their somehow know to keep that box clean. And they're able to do that by projecting their poop upward and out. But over at the end of the year, by the time they're raised about 20 days old or 25 days old, there's a lot of fecal matter and a lot of stuff in there by the end of the season. And there you have a nice male preening. They're starting to get their flight feathers in. They're starting to care for their feathers for their dispersal outside the box here soon. And those three there, there's supposed to be four, so one has dispersed already, and these three are soon to leave the box here in the upcoming days of them preening there. So 30 days, so they're after the fifth egg is laid in kestrels, the full clutch is laid. They incubate hard and heavy for about 30 days, and then once they hatch all at once, they will incubate for another, or they'll raise the young for 30 days. So it's about a 2-month process. So dispersal, here we're starting to see dispersal of young. Again, if you're out in your block looking for kestrels for the breeding bird atlas, look for the end of May and June for some of these young. And you can definitely tell their feathers are a little bit fluffed up a little bit. But you can definitely tell that they're outside the box and they're ready to leave. Flip it up. Mm-hmm. All right, so we're gonna move on. I don't know, is there any questions in the chat? I can't see the looking for the chat all. No? Okay. Yeah, feel free to type in any questions as I'm typing and we can cover them at the end here. So we're kind of going to move on to barn owls. A little different species than the kestrels with the nesting. As the male and female kind of male needs specific roosting areas, more specialized in roosting, where the female is mostly in the box. But here we have a barn owl box, some young sticking their heads out of the box, and then we have the adults sitting in a silo where it roosts there. So typically there are cavities, but for the most part, these owls are without boxes are trying to find as much as possible opportunities to lay their eggs and rear their young. As you can see up in this right corner, this is a PennDOT salt shed where there's been barn owls in there, and they have nested in the eaves up here in the past. And I was able to find these young nestlings up there by putting up a very large ladder and climbing up that height. And I peered in there and found this nestling. These nestlings in here. It's not a big space. It's not a spacious space. Not enough room for them to get around, and not very safe at all. There's roofing nails sticking out of the roofing sheathing there and so forth. But it's also very high. So as they get older, they tend to kind of be more aggressive towards the food coming in. And sometimes they will fall to their death pretty much. So this location, I found a couple skeletons down on the floor, where obviously these young in the past were reared in this eave, grown up to a point when there's nothing there to kind of catch them at a certain age where they don't know their kind of spatial awareness. So it's unfortunate, but I put up a box there and we prevented that from happening since then. Other areas, of course, you can find them in silos and random locations. They are often in silos, kind of hanging out during the day. If there's no spot for them to go into a box, this barn here, this location has just been occasional sightings where it's been a visitor here and there. I do have a box there, but we haven't had a nesting pair since. So it's basically just kind of a quick stop for a migrating or dispersal young to kind of hang out. And before boxes as well, they would often nest on the ground in silos in the old silage. This is often the time the worst case, because predation can happen with raccoons, rat snakes, and things like that. So it's not a very safe spot, but for the most part, that's what they were doing without any nest boxes in the silo. So in February, we start getting visitors of random places sometimes. A landowner took this picture of outside their bedroom window of a barn owl visiting. So they are starting to move in February, possibly looking for nesting opportunities. But if you don't take care of your box and you let the rock doves or rock pigeons overtake, barn owls probably can't fit very well in that box. And so therefore, maintaining your box is pretty important. And making sure that it's cleaned out every year, and plenty of wood chips and things like that are put back in there. This was a very dirty box to clean out for me. In the beginning of the early season, we get visitors in these nest boxes. All kinds of things are creeping in there, kind of popping their heads in there, very curious, wondering if they can take over or what's going on there. So we got Carolina wrens, rock pigeons, we got house sparrows, and we got starlings coming in and checking out too. So even in the pre-season or the off-season, it's very interesting of what kind of things are using the box and what kind of things are happening inside the box in the off-season. But this is usually happening before the barn owls take place. If there's a barn owl in there, they usually look in, turn around, and head out right away. They don't often put up a fight like the starlings and kestrels do. So this kind of starts after there's not really nest building as the kestrel would do, that she does create a cup like kind of the kestrels do, but there's not much nest building that happens in the barn owl. They'll just select a spot in the back of the box. And this is where mostly they'll lay their eggs in the back of the box. So copulation continues throughout from before the first egg is laid until way after the egg is laid as well. The male continue to bring in food and copulate the female, always offering food. And even after the eggs, like I said, are laid, the full clutch is laid, and they'll continue to copulate. So this is probably a pair bonding thing to represent the pair there. This also occurs outside the box, which I have learned since putting a camera outside the box on this perch, that copulation can occur outside of what we don't see outside the boxes. So even with kestrels on the line, we see barn owls copulating on perches outside the box as well. Most people, we won't get an opportunity to see this without a lot of the videos that are recorded. One, it's hard to see from a distance, and they'd be very kind of skittish about observers close by. So egg incubation and hatching. So after about 30 days of egg laying or egg incubation, barn owls are asynchronized hatching. And egg laying as well. So they'll lay an egg every other day and until the clutch is full, but she'll start incubating immediately on that first egg. So unlike the kestrel, where the kestrel's eggs are all hatched at once, the barn owls do not do that. So nestlings hatch about every other day. And the incubation is about 30 days of incubating. And at that time, the female, once again, is in the box fully cutting up the food, making sure there's enough food for small young nestlings that just came out of the egg. So that's her role for the most part. The male just delivers. I never seen the male cutting up food for the young at all. And there's plenty of food out there. As you can see with this video on the right, there's plenty of food out there among the box. This is lined with meadow voles and mice ready for the female. So this is the male offering, saying, I can provide food. There's plenty of food here. She's in the box all day long, so she needs to have plenty of supply to cut up the food and as much food as possible for herself. That's pretty impressive. There's plenty of food there at that farm. So this is kind of like a rough estimate, what we've recorded in 2019 and 2020 of the hatching period. This can change significantly based on the type of winter that we're having. This year we had a really early hatching period, about 2 weeks earlier than 2020. So we had a very warm winter. Some of the pairs stick around in the winter. They don't necessarily migrate if there's a mild winter. There's plenty of food. So nesting can technically start as early as mid-February, laying that egg, which we saw somewhat this year, a little bit earlier than normal. And as the hatching period occurs, you can see the food deliveries start to really pick up there. So the feeding of the young, like I said, the female is taking most of the food and tearing it up for pieces as they continue to grow. There is a significant age difference since they hatch every other day. So there's some that need care basically for while their siblings don't need care. So in this one, the sibling is obviously does not need the mother to tear up the food because it's taking on the responsibility for itself now. So if that female would leave the box, most part, this nestling would be okay. I guess it would be okay. It seems like a interesting way to take on your first bite. She almost got it. Almost got it. There you go. I think that's enough for the day to digest. You're gonna put it on. So the feeding continues as they get older. The female will eventually, about 30 days or so after the first egg is hatched, the female will leave the box and leave the young in the box. So if there is a young nestling in the box that hasn't quite learned how to swallow that bird whole yet, that young nestling most likely will perish. And we saw that this year in our nest cam, is that we had a nestling perish. It was very small, while the older nestlings were much grown. And basically the female left the box and was not there during the day to help cut up the food. So that's unfortunate sometimes, but that does happen. And that is a cost and benefit of barn owl hatching. So they are eagerly waiting for food at night from either, probably most likely the male, but sometimes the female delivers as well. So you can see that's a very aggressive. So you have to be very aggressive. The older ones will most likely get that food delivery there, and some of the young will be pushed out and potentially. But if there's plenty of food throughout the night, then most likely the one that just got fed earlier in the night will sit back and digest the food. They're not as hungry. And so that lone individual that wasn't aggressive, they'll most likely get the food. One clip I found was interesting was we had a delivery of this adult delivering to the young, but the young were so distraught that they did not want to accept the food from the adult. They refused it. They found that it might have been a predator or something, and the adult was very confused of, why aren't you taking my food? And so they did not accept the food from the adult. So occasionally that is seen, which is pretty fascinating. When I see that, it's not often seen. They do eventually calm down and then take the food from the adult then at some point. I think there was, before that adult came in, there was some screaming outside the box potentially that they got, or something was heard, if they got freaked out, and they just did not want anything to do with the parent, which was very confusing for the parent probably. As you can see, it was a little confused there. So here's some delivery times we've recorded. Most likely it's pretty common to see peak deliveries throughout the early part of the night to the later part of the night. As you can see, it's peaked, between 10 and noon, or 10 and midnight, I'm sorry. So you can see a lot of that happening at that point. So delivery is pretty fascinating. There's lots of stuff going on in the delivery. It's very quick at times, but it's a lot happening, especially in the breeding or the hatching period, and the female joins in the hunt. As you can see, this chart down here below indicates how much feeding occurs in the incubation period and then really picks up in the hatching. And then once the female leaves the box and joins in a hunt, it really picks up. Sometimes 25 items in a night. So we were really happy to record a lot of these deliveries and see how much is being delivered, but we didn't really see what was being eaten outside the box as well. So we can't really determine if the male was eating how many a night or not. So some fun behavior that happens, just some goofiness that we just appreciate. Barn owls more and more. The female sitting in the box all day long. Sometimes she's fairly entertaining, looking at things, observing, being just very entertaining, and that's kind of gives us joy. And that's one of the things that's so fun about nest cameras and watching them, is just seeing the things that happen in a nest box. Here we have, let's see what's happening here. We have possibly, oh, this is a parent coming in and looking at the nestlings like, oh, what are those? And how many did we say we were going to have? So it was very confused about the nestlings in the box. So it almost was surprised that it had nestlings. I'll play that again for you. So watch the female's in the back, and the male comes in, goes right to the female, but almost steps on the young, and kind of surprised about the squishy things there. Not quite sure if we agreed with 8 young, ma'am. So that was a pretty entertaining clip. So again, time in the box during the day. These things are they're so fun to watch. They're in the box all day long. They don't leave. It's very smelly in there, by the way. A lot of dirt, a lot of things happening. So they're also getting rid of some of the food that they have as well. So occasionally you'll catch moments where We talk about owl pellets and things like that, but usually we'll get that right moment where we can see the owl discharging its casting there. And then also they do a lot of sleeping as well. It's very entertaining to see owls sleep throughout the day. And that's all they do for the most part. This is after the female left and that young's out for the count. So the first time outside the box is very entertaining, but interesting and also nerve-wracking as someone that has a video camera and watching them. So this is the first time they've ever seen the outside world outside the box or spread their wings or stretch their wings. So this is very new to them, very, cautious. So some things aren't that perfect for them. And it's a learning experience. And so just so you know, all these owls that are seen outside the box survived and none were injured at all. But as you can see that the first owl kind of flew out not very gracefully, and the second owl kind of not sure how to fly yet, not sure how to take that flight, is kind of climbing a wooden siding, but we all know talons aren't really made for climbing wooden siding there. So it's very nervous about kind of just taking that first step up there. And we'll continue to watch this here. So the first time I saw this, I was very surprised and shocked. It very almost happened a couple times and made it to the peak of the barn there. And it didn't do well going up to the top and finding its perch. But it did come back to the box that night. As we do head counts every night when we watch these videos, we make sure that they're coming back to the box. So I assure you that barn owl came back healthy as anything. As you can see, his sibling was looking down saying, what did you just do? So there's nest box maintenance as well. I mean, like I said, it gets very dirty in this box. The pellets break up into a small, very fibrous type of substrate that's very smelly and can build up. It's almost to the rim of the camera here. But like the Kestrel, they do develop some ways of developing some kind of system to keep the box clean. And they are often doing quite a bit of this. And I see this when I go and clean out the boxes, that I can see an area where they've actually shoved a lot of the substrate to the end of the box there. And the boxes, once they get to a certain height in their young, they're running out of room, basically. So the box they're pretty tight up there into their head, so they can shove away as much substrate as possible and kick that substrate out. And as you look in the video on the right too, you'll see this adult go in, and then eventually you can see material being pushed out of the box there a little bit. So again, sometimes when we take a moment here and with the Game Commission and ban these young, when they're out of the box, I actually go up there at the time and clean out the box for the remaining period of the nestling stage, because that can get pretty filthy in there and get filled up. So it's a learning stage for them. Once they get out of the box, they are very curious. They're using their eye perception, their perception of distancing and seeing in the dark, flying. It's something that I was encouraged to do with some other websites, create exercising platforms outside the nest box cavity. So they wouldn't have to be climbing on the edge of the barn or falling, so they can get out there and properly kind of do their dancing, whatever you want to call the disco dancing, with their heads. It's a great location for them to hang out, adjust, and just kind of use it as an exercising platform for all stages of when they're out of the box. Something I forgot to mention is once kestrels leave the box, they don't come back to the box. Once a barn owl leaves the box, they do come back and reuse the box here and there. So they will stay in the box once they first leave the box, and so they'll continue to come back and use it as a safe spot. But then eventually they all leave the box and disperse, whether they're roosting in the silo with the parent or they're basically moving into another property. Oftentimes we would see them in the mornings, out, kind of on the exercising platforms. And you can see that one coming in as for landing wasn't quite clean. So it's still learning, and that platform was giving that ability to exercise. And on the one on the right, you can see an owl flying off into the distance. Most like that owl did not come back. That was a dispersal of one of the youngs in the early mornings, taking off pretty early dawn morning. So I don't know where it went. It might have roosted in a tree for the day, but that owl did not come back to the box that day. So that's all I have for the videos of the nest box. Lots of thank yous for folks that have supported this nest box program, and giving me the ability to do what I do. So lots of people out there that have helped me, and I really appreciate their work. But it's been a great learning experience. I've learned a lot with doing this kind of work here. So if you have any questions about maintaining a box or what's happening in a box, or any other questions, feel free to send me an email.
All right. Thank you, John. That was really cool to see all the clips and to see a different side of these birds that we don't usually get to see. I guess if there are any questions right now, could put them in the chat. I haven't seen any come through the chat here, and just keeping an eye on the time. It is 8, so people might want to just email questions if they have them. But I can stop the recording here.